Jake had texted me that morning, saying he wouldn't be back until Sunday night. His cousin needed help moving in another state. Mom's around though, he added casually. So if you need anything, just drop by. I didn't plan to. Not really. But late that afternoon, after finishing some errands nearby, I found myself turning onto their street. I told myself it was just out of habit. I practically lived there during high school, but I think part of me was hoping for something more. The driveway was empty. No sound, no movement. Just the late July sun spilling across the garage door and a few dry leaves caught in the corners of the porch. I stepped up and checked under the mat. Same spot we'd always hidden the spare key. Only this time, there wasn't just a key. There was a folded note. My name written across the front, in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. Neat, slanted, cursive, feminine, familiar. Come in whenever. I'll be home after 5. No signature, but I didn't need one. My pulse ticked up as I turned the key in the lock. The house smelled the same. Lemon floor cleaner and faint lavender from the diffuser Melissa kept near the staircase. But without Jake's music or the distant hum of the TV, the silence felt heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. I walked through slowly. Everything was in place. The framed photos by the stairs, the worn throw blanket draped over the couch, the sunlight stretching long across the hardwood floor. It all looked the same, and yet it didn't. The house felt different without Jake. Or maybe I felt different walking into it. I stood in the living room, unsure of what to do. Sit, wait, leave. Last fall came back to me in pieces. A late night wine. A quiet conversation with Melissa on that same couch after Jake had gone to sleep. I remember how close we were. How her eyes didn't look away when I spoke. How my hand had brushed hers, not by accident, and she didn't pull away. But nothing happened. Not really. Still, something shifted after that night. I hadn't seen her much since. She always seemed to step into another room when I arrived, or left a little too early when Jake had people over. And now this, the key, the note, the open invitation. It didn't feel accidental. I sat down on the edge of the couch, running my fingers along the armrest. The fabric was slightly worn. I remembered Melissa's voice that night, soft, tired, but open in a way I hadn't expected. She talked about how empty the house felt since her divorce. How Jake was pulling away, making plans of his own. She'd looked at me, her son's best friend, and said, "Sometimes I miss having someone just sit with me." You know, I hadn't known what to say then. Maybe I still didn't. But here I was, sitting again in that same space, the memory of her voice hanging in the room like perfume. The front door clicked gently behind me. Not loud, just enough to make my heart leap. Her voice came from the hallway. "I thought you might come." She stepped into the kitchen like she'd just returned from a walk. Calm, graceful, like nothing about this was unusual. A canvas tote in one hand, hair pinned loosely up, a faint dusting of something like flour on her shirt. She didn't look. Surprised to see me standing there by the counter, half in shadow, still unsure whether I was supposed to be there. "I figured you'd find the key," she said, setting the bag on the table. No greeting, just that. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She didn't wait for me to answer. The garage lights flickering again. "Think you could take a look?" "Jake usually does, but," she trailed off, glancing out the window toward the fading light. "Well, he's not here." There was relief. In that. In her skipping over the note. The silence between us. The unspoken reason I came. We pretended it was about the garage, and maybe that made it easier. I followed her out, grabbing the small toolbox from the hallway like I used to when we were in high school, and her house was a second home. The garage was warm and full of soft, ambient dust, the air sharp with the scent of oil and pine from a half-used can of floor cleaner in the corner. She held the flashlight while I balanced on the step stool. The light flickered in and out as I adjusted the wiring. Her shoulder brushed mine when she stepped closer to steady the stool, and I felt the contact all the way down my spine. "You always were good at fixing things," she said softly. I didn't answer. My fingers were clumsy with the screwdriver, too aware of how close she was. When our hands touched, hers reaching to pass me the pliers, neither of us moved too quickly. Not like we had something to hide, but not like we didn't know what it meant. We didn't talk about Jake, or the last time we were alone together, or the note. Instead, we talked about her tomato plants not doing well this year, and how the neighbor's new dog kept digging under the fence. Harmless things. unimportant things. But between the words was something slower, heavier. When we finished, she didn't say thank you, just offered tea, her hand resting briefly on the small of my back as we stepped out of the garage into the cooler evening. She made chamomile, the same kind from last fall, and we took the mugs out to the porch. The sun had dropped behind the fence, casting long lavender shadows across the grass. She sat first, pulling her knees up under the old blue blanket, draped over the chair. I hadn't realized how much I remembered that blanket until I saw it again. Its faded stitching, the tiny burn mark near the hem. I took the seat beside her. We didn't say much, just sat. Her foot, bare and quiet, stretched out and brushed mine under the table. Neither of us pulled away. The porch creaked now and then. A car passed down the street. She sipped slowly, eyes watching something distant, something far beyond the garden or the house, or even me. Funny, she said after a while. How quiet can feel full when someone's next to you. I looked at her then, really looked. The soft lines near her eyes. The tired, deliberate calm she always wore like armor. Her mug trembled just slightly when she set it down. I wanted to say something. Anything. But all I could do was sit there, hands warm around the cup, letting the silence grow thicker between us, like a blanket we were both too afraid to lift. I hadn't meant to stay. I told myself I'd leave after the tea, after a few more quiet moments on the porch. But the hours folded in on themselves, and the darkness came gently, like it belonged here. She didn't offer the guest room. She didn't say, "Stay if you want." She just said, "I'll be up early," and then walked up the stairs barefoot, the blanket from the porch still draped over her shoulders. I sat on the couch with the television off. No sound but the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of wood settling. The air was cooler now, but I didn't move. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling like I had so many nights in this house. Only this time, I wasn't just a friend sleeping over. I folded my arms behind my head and thought of the last time I'd stayed the night. Jake had gone out late, some college party. I wasn't in the mood. Melissa had just come home from a long shift. We ended up watching an old black and white movie she loved. She sat at one end of the couch, I at the other. At least, that's how it started. Somewhere between the second act and the end credits, she had shifted closer. Her feet tucked under her, wine glass nearly empty, voice slower. At some point, she'd leaned her head against my shoulder. I hadn't moved. My heart had been pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. I'd thought about kissing her. Just once. Just to see if the stillness between us was something we were both feeling. But I didn't. I stayed frozen until the movie ended and she gently stood up, murmured good night, and went to bed without looking back. The next morning, everything had been normal. Too normal. And maybe that was the part that stuck with me the most. Now, lying on that same couch, I could feel that weight again, the ache of something unfinished. I woke to the scent of pancakes and coffee. The light spilling into the living room was golden, soft-edged. I sat up slowly, blinking away the dream I couldn't remember but didn't want to leave. The house felt lived in but quiet. Safe, somehow. In the kitchen, Melissa moved easily, her hair tied loosely at the back of her neck, a soft sweater hanging off one shoulder, bare feet on the cool tile. Jazz played faintly from the speaker by the window. The kind of music with no lyrics, just drifting notes like morning fog. She didn't seem startled to see me, just nodded toward the table. Sit. You're not getting out of here without breakfast. I obeyed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, trying not to look too closely at the way her sweater dipped when she leaned forward to pour the coffee. She placed a plate in front of me. Pancakes, butter already melting, syrup still warm in the little pitcher. I used to make these for Jake every Sunday. When he was younger, she said, settling into the chair across from me. Now I mostly make them out of habit. I picked up the fork, unsure how to respond. Everything she said felt layered, like there was always something beneath the words. She watched me for a few quiet seconds. Then she smiled, gently, knowingly. You always notice the quiet parts, don't you? I paused mid-bite. Her eyes didn't move away. Neither did mine. I wanted to say something clever, something that would acknowledge everything we weren't saying. But I couldn't. So I just nodded, swallowed. Let the moment stretch between us. She looked down at her plate. Her voice softened. Most people miss them. I wondered if that was why she'd left the key. Not for help with the garage, not for convenience, but for something else. A way to test whether I'd still pick up on the quiet parts. I found myself wishing, almost irrationally, that the garage light would break again. That something, anything, would give me another reason to be here, sitting across from her, listening to the low murmur of jazz and the rain-soft rhythm of her presence. We ate in silence after that. But it wasn't empty. It was full of things we weren't saying. The sun was already high when I walked back through the house that Sunday. She was in the hallway near the back, sleeves rolled up, a large cardboard box at her feet, dust on her knees. She glanced up and smiled like I'd never left. "I've been meaning to clear the storage room for years," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Today just felt like the day. I offered to help, and she didn't refuse. The storage room was narrow and dim, filled with stacked boxes, old linens, and forgotten decorations from holidays that no one celebrated anymore. It smelled of cedar and old paper. We moved things around slowly, neither of us rushing. I think we both knew this wasn't about cleaning. She pulled a heavy box from the bottom shelf, the cardboard soft from age, one corner nearly collapsing. She sank to the floor, cross-legged, and opened it. Photos. Dozens of them. Some in faded envelopes, others loose and curling at the edges. Her wedding, Jake as a toddler, vacations, birthdays. Versions of her I'd never seen. Younger, brighter, untouched by the quiet weariness she carried now. I knelt beside her as she picked through them. Her fingers moved carefully, like each image was too fragile for haste. She smiled at a few, but it didn't reach her eyes. "They used to make me feel loved," she said after a while. "Now they just feel old." I said nothing. Just watched her hold a photo of herself in her 20s, standing by a lake, hair wild, laughter frozen in motion. "I used to feel seen," she continued, her voice lower now, almost confessional. "Now people look past me, or through me. Even Jake. It's like I've become part of the wallpaper." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. I wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but I didn't. Instead, I sat with her in the quiet, the weight of her honesty resting in the space between us. She set the photo down and exhaled, slow and steady. "Sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you this." A gust of wind cut through the hallway and slammed into the back door, swinging it wide open with a sharp clap. We both jumped. The room filled with fresh air, sudden and cold. Melissa stood, slowly, brushing her hands on her jeans, eyes still on the open door. She didn't close it right away, just stared into the shifting light, her shoulders drawn tight, as if she was holding something back. Then she turned toward me, her steps soft across the wood floor. She didn't touch me, just stood close enough that I could feel the warmth of her. "I knew it was you under that mat," she said quietly. "Not Jake." I swallowed. My mouth went dry. The air between us changed, thick with everything we'd avoided saying all weekend. That I almost told her. That I'd thought about her every week since last fall. That no one else made silence feel so full. That I came to the house because I hoped, quietly, desperately, that the note had really been for me. But the words caught in my throat. I looked at her instead, at the way the sunlight hit the edge of her hair, at the way her breath slowed like she was waiting for something. All I could say was, "I know." She stepped closer. Her hand lifted, slow, unsure, and rested gently on the center of my chest. Not for long, just enough to feel my heartbeat, just enough to leave something there. Then she pulled away, turned, and walked toward the open door. The screen swayed behind her in the breeze, creaking back and forth, like time itself had paused to watch her go. I left early Monday morning. The sky was still dim, the house quiet, still wrapped in the hush of sleep. I didn't leave a note, didn't make a sound, just slipped my shoes on by the front door, lifted my jacket from the coat rack, and pulled the door closed behind me. There was no goodbye, no discussion, no attempt to define what those 2 days had been. It felt like leaving the last page of a book unturned. Like maybe, if I didn't finish it, the story could still go on somewhere just out of sight that I didn't hear from her. After that, Jake came back, texting me like nothing had happened. "Thanks for checking in on Mom. Appreciate it." I told him the garage light was working fine. He joked that I'd missed an awful road trip and sent a blurry selfie of a motel with questionable wallpaper. The world kept spinning like it always had, unaware of what had stirred in the quiet corners. 3 weeks passed. Then I saw her. It was at the grocery store, by the produce section. I was reaching for a bag of apples when I turned, and there she was, holding a carton of strawberries, her hair tied back, sunglasses perched in her hair. For a second, we just stood there, the moment stretching longer than it should have. The air between us thick and strange. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But she smiled. Soft, small, barely there, and gave the slightest nod. I returned it, just as restrained, and we both kept walking, carts rolling in opposite directions like nothing had passed between us. It should have ended there. But that night, when I got home, I hung my jacket on the back of my bedroom chair and felt something crinkle in the pocket. I reached in and pulled out a small, folded envelope. No name, no return address. But I knew the paper. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. Inside was a single line. The garage lights broken again. Come whenever. No punctuation. No date. Just that. I held the note for a long time, letting its weight settle. I didn't know when she'd placed it there. Maybe while I was sleeping on the couch. Maybe that Sunday afternoon when I went to the store. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she had, and that I had found it exactly when I was supposed to. I didn't reply. Not right away. Maybe not ever. I folded the note and slid it into the back of my desk drawer, beneath a stack of old receipts and college notebooks. But I didn't forget it. 2 weeks later, I was driving past their street on the way to a friend's place. I didn't mean to slow down. I didn't mean to look, but I did. Her house stood quiet, sun catching the top of the shutters. Garden overgrown in that way that looks intentional. I coasted to a stop for a second, just enough to glance at the front step. And there it was, the key, tucked under the edge of the mat, just barely visible. Waiting. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't ring the bell. I just sat there, engine humming softly, a dull ache blooming in my chest. The key wasn't for Jake. It never had been. But maybe it wasn't really for me either, not in the way I'd once hoped. Maybe it was for the version of us that lived only in quiet gestures, in glances that lasted too long, in silences filled with almosts and maybes. Maybe some stories aren't meant to end. Maybe they just echoed. As I pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of the porch. Empty chair. Blanket folded neatly on the armrest. The screen door shifting slightly in the wind. That we never spoke about the key again. But part of me still wonders if it's there now. Under the mat, quiet and waiting, like a memory neither of us was brave enough to claim.